Welcome to the Real News Network, and welcome back to our weekly live stream. Palestinians in the occupied West Bank fear that Israel is preparing to unleash the same people-destroying, population-displacing, civilization-erasing force that it unleashed on Gaza for 15 months. Beginning just days after Israel and Hamas began phase one of last month's fragile ceasefire in Gaza, the Israeli military has sent troops, bulldozers, drones, helicopters, and heavy battle tanks into the northern West Bank. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said on Monday that he was gravely concerned by the rising violence in the occupied West Bank by Israeli settlers and other violations. Palestinian writer and journalist Mariam Barghouti told Democracy Now! This week that what we are seeing, in fact, is a green light of annexation. What is happening right now, she said, in the West Bank is de facto annexation of lands. This Israeli offensive, the so-called Operation Iron Wall, is one of the most intense military operations in the West Bank since the height of the Second Intifada Palestinian uprising against Israel's occupation just over 2 decades ago. Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, said this week that 40,000 Palestinians have been forced out of the refugee camps in Jenin, Tulkarem, and Nur Shams. All activity by the United Nations Relief and Works Agency in those areas has also been stopped. Now, Katz made it clear that this is not a short-term operation. In a written statement, Katz said, "I instructed the IDF to prepare for a long stay in the camps that were cleared for the coming year and to not allow residents to return and the terror to return and grow. We will not return to the reality that was in the past," he said. "We will continue to clear refugee camps and other terror centers to dismantle the battalions and terror infrastructure of extreme Islam that was built, armed, funded, and supported by the Iranian evil axis," he claimed, in an attempt to establish an Eastern terror front, end quote. Now, I want you to keep those statements from Israel's defense minister in your head as you watch this next clip. This is actually from an incredible documentary report that we filmed in the now empty Jenin refugee camp in July of 2023, 3 months before October 7th. The report was shot and produced by Ross Dominy, Nadia Peridot, and Ahmad El-Baz. Take a look.
The Real News Network spoke to Hania Salama, whose son Farouk was killed by the Israeli army just days before he was due to be married.
فاروق ابني أول ما أثر فيه وخلاه يجاهد اعتقال أخوه فادي، وحشيتهم فوتوا علينا، آذوه، ضربوه، هنوني أنا، دمروا الدار، فبقى عمره 7 سنين، فحط حقد وكره إلا اليهود، معاملتهم السيئة للبشر. بقول عنهم إرهابيين. مين اللي زرع الإرهاب؟ مش هم اللي زرعوه. هذا فاروق ابني شاف الاجتياح وشاف الظلم وشاف الخوف. والله طول ما في احتلال وفي يهود ما في مستقبل لبشر، ما في مستقبل لبشر إلا إذا هم دشرونا بحالنا وخلونا شعب نعيش. إحنا من حقنا نعيش يا عم، من حقنا، من حقنا. أخذوا نص أراضينا ورضينا وكنا يلا دولتين، بس هم مش راضيين يعترفوا بهذا الشيء، مش راضيين. في عندهم ناس متطرفة بدهاش دولتين.
Hania, like many of Jenin's residents, is a refugee of the 1948 Zionist expulsion of people from across Palestine. Today, these depopulated villages either remain empty or have been razed to the ground to make way for Israel's settlements. Palestinians are banned from returning to these homes.
اللي هجرنا من بلادنا اليهود فاتوا على القرى ذبحوا الأطفال، اللي يشوفوه ويشكوا إنه مقاوم بقوا يذبحوه زي ما تذبح الغنم. يعني خراف حماتي طلعوا من البلاد فيش حاملين لواعيهم. بعدين عمه لفاروق الله يرحمه مصطفى قاسم سلامي شنكوه قبل ما يطلع. بقى عنده طموح فاروق يقيم اسم مخيم لاجئ عن نفسه واستشهدوا، وإن شاء الله أولادنا اللي جايين بيقيموه ونرجع لأولادنا وناخذ حقنا.
With these tanks and bulldozers rolling through the occupied West Bank right now, with Israel launching new attacks in southern Syria this week, with the ceasefire in Gaza still very much in danger of collapsing before phase one of the deal is set to end on Saturday, and with Donald Trump still joking that it would be best if the U.S. took over Gaza. The bubble has officially burst on any pre-inauguration hopes that people had that Trump's presidency would somehow usher in peace in the Middle East and an end to the humanitarian horror of Israel's ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from what remains of occupied historic Palestine, and the United States' support for it. Quite the opposite, in fact. And not only that, but here in the so-called West, the United States, Canada, Europe, we're seeing a corresponding surge in state and institutional repression of free speech, the free press, and the independent and corporate media sides speaking the truth about Israel's genocide of Palestinians and our government's complicity in it. We are also seeing a surge in the criminalization of Palestine solidarity protests and attempts to classify solidarity with Palestine as support for terrorism. So listen, we need to get real about where we are right now, what we are facing, and how we can keep forging forward, fighting for what's right and good and beautiful in times of great darkness and great danger like the time we're in now. Fighting for peace in a world of war. Fighting for life in a culture of mass death. And that is why I could not be more grateful that we've got the great Abby Martin on the live stream today to help us do just that. You all should know Abby by now, but in case you don't, for some reason, and you've been living under a rock, Abby Martin is an independent journalist and host of The Empire Files, an interview and documentary series that everyone needs to watch and support. She is the director of the 2019 documentary Gaza Fights for Freedom, and is also directing a new documentary called Earth's Greatest Enemy, which examines how the United States empire is not only a primary contributor to climate change, but the central entity that imperils life on Earth. Abby, thank you so much for joining us again. It's always so great to have you back on The Real News. I want to start with the latest horrifying developments in Israel's war on Palestine. Can you walk us through what we're seeing and perhaps what we're not seeing in the West Bank right now?
I mean, I think your intro did a really great job at laying out the current situation, Max. And thank you for the intro to me. That was wonderful. Look, it's very clear that whatever ceasefire deal was negotiated, that the annexation and the green lighting of the further annexation of the West Bank was part of the sweetheart addition to that ceasefire deal. And that's exactly what we've seen just completely transition from Gaza to the West Bank, where extremist settlers in tandem with Israeli soldiers are clearing out entire refugee camps and villages at an expulsion rate that we have never, frankly, seen before. I mean, 40,000 Palestinians being expelled just over 35 days is just extraordinary. And this is happening almost on a daily basis, where at the barrel of a gun, dozens of Palestinians are being forced and rejected from their homes. We've seen 60 Palestinians be killed in this time frame, several children. Just over the last week, we saw 2 Palestinian children being gunned down. This just is happening at such a rapid pace. It's very dizzying. And it just seems like there are no measures in place whatsoever to stop this rapid annexation. And you know, this whole Operation Iron Wall, it's very clear that the ultimate goal is to clear out as much as possible and just have the plausible deniability. Oh, it's settlers. Oh, it's Hamas fighters. Oh, well, we have to do it because of the violence that's happening. I mean, again, if you don't get to the root of the violence, it's just going to erupt. It's a tinderbox and it's a pressure cooker. So all of the things that are happening as a result of the clearing out of these villages and refugee camps, it's an inevitability. So you're going to see waves of, of attacks, whether they be knife attacks or suicide bombings, or like the inert, bombs that didn't explode and actually kill people on those buses. I mean, all of these things are inevitabilities once you engage on a full-scale invasion and war to the native population that's already under a very extremely repressive police state dictatorship that prevents them from doing anything at all.
Could you say just a little more on that last point? You know, like you filmed there in the West Bank. You've been there. You reported on it many times. I guess for folks who maybe haven't looked into the West Bank as much as they've learned about Gaza over the past 2 years, could you just say a little more for folks who are watching this about the state of life as such in the West Bank before this Operation Iron Wall began?
Yeah, and a perfect example of that is this current ceasefire deal, phase 1, where people may be asking themselves, how is it possible that hundreds of Palestinian quote-unquote prisoners, really they're hostages in their own right, how is it possible that there's so many hundreds of Palestinians being held and being released at the behest of, Hamas's demands? It may be confusing to some to see, just a couple dozen hostages from the Israeli side being released for hundreds of Palestinians. Well, the answer is basically the fact that there's this repressive police state style dictatorship that wantonly just arrests hundreds of people, detains them arbitrarily, keeps them without charges or trial. And that's precisely what we've seen ramp up and escalate in the aftermath of October 7th. Hundreds and hundreds of Palestinians, including dozens of children and women, not to take away the revolutionary agency or political agency of women, but it is just unbelievable how many people have been detained arbitrarily and held. Why aren't they called hostages? I have no idea. But it just, again, just kind of paints the picture of what Palestinians are living under. They cannot raise a Palestinian flag. They cannot practice any political activity. It is crazy. I mean, they can set up arbitrary checkpoints, resort these people's lives to a living hell, set up just random blockades that can reroute people, just take hours out of their day just to make their lives extremely uncomfortable. But it just goes far beyond that. I mean, raiding, killing Palestinians arbitrarily, having no recourse whatsoever. You certainly cannot have armed resistance. I mean, anything that can be construed as a weapon in these people's homes or cars can just subject you to not only humiliating tactics, but also just being thrown in prison. I mean, we're talking about such a crazy level of control that simply, the David versus Goliath, just symbolism of throwing a rock at a tank. There's a law on the books that can put a Palestinian child in prison for 20 years for simply throwing a rock at an armed tank. So these are the kind of measures that have been in place since 1967 when this military dictatorship was imposed illegally. And ever since then, we've been placated as Westerners with this promise of a two-state solution, which has just been a cover for the continued annexation of the West Bank. And under Trump, we've seen just a complete rapid greenlighting of just continuing that policy.
Yeah, man. I mean, I did not want to incorporate it as a visual element in this live stream because, frankly, it's too ghoulish and horrifying to give any more airtime to. But I would point folks, if you haven't already seen it, to an AI-generated video that our president shared on his Truth Social account promoting the transformation of Gaza into a luxury beachfront destination, filled with skyscrapers, condos, bearded belly dancers. Like Mondoweiss reported, the video shows Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sunbathing together in Gaza, Elon Musk eating hummus, the area being converted into a resort called Trump Gaza, a golden Trump statue, and children running from rubble into picturesque beaches. Like this is, what the hell, man? I guess, where do you even find your center of humanity in such an inhumane timeline?
I mean, that's what's so creepy about it. It's the dizzying spectacle of it all. And I feel like Trump, I feel like he was much more dialed in 2016 personally, because he was less, senile and whatever. He was younger and more astute. But now it does seem like he doesn't give a shit. I mean, he is just going for it and letting all of these crazy outliers just take the government for a ride. I mean, Elon Musk, this AI stuff, it's like by the time that you're trying to unpack this press conference where he's sitting next to this grinning genocide fugitive talking about how Gaza is a hellhole and how you're going to get why would you want to go back to Gaza? You're just going to get shot and killed next to the grinning genocide fugitive who did it. I mean, once you unpack that, he's already signed another 1,000 executive orders. Once you like try to make sense of this AI generated video of Trump's golden head on a balloon and kids running out of the rubble into a more attractive version of Elon Musk eating hummus and pita. I mean, they've already done this, that, and the other. So it's again, it's the spectacle. It's like no response is the good response. It's so difficult to even maneuver this new political landscape, even for us who follow it for a job. I mean, a perfect example is like the Sig Heil twice, the Nazi salute from Elon. I mean, it's like, what is the appropriate response to this? Because they will just gaslight you and say what you see isn't reality. And so by the time you're like, no, 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 that's a Nazi salute. No, no, no. It's like they've already done this, that, and the other thing. So it's such an insane time to be living and to navigate this political space. And I just keep comparing it to like the mass hallucinations. Everyone's relegated to their own framework of reality. The algorithm boosts whatever it is that you want to justify as that reality. And that's kind of our respective mass hallucinations that we're wading through. I mean, I feel like I'm living in reality, and that's why I'm so aghast and horrified by everything. But like,
yeah, that's why I wake up screaming every night, because like, you know, it's in fact, like so much of our politics is like a war on the means of perceiving reality. Like it is
yes.
a war over the narrative of what we're actually seeing, and like from. Everyone's watching a plane crash down the road in Washington, D.C., and it's immediately a battle over, is this DEI or is this, you know, like something else? Is the fires in my home state of California, is this like, you know, a DEI thing? Is this climate change? The war over the means of perception, I think, is really the terrain upon which so many of us are fighting or forced to fight in the 21st century. And I definitely want to circle back to like Trump, Musk, and how we navigate all of this here at home in the second half of the discussion. But I guess before we kind of move on, I wanted to bring us back to the West Bank, because you mentioned the gaslighting, right? You mentioned, you know, like the ways that war on perception, the top-down narratives handed to us by the very villains who are, you know, like committing genocide and destroying, you know, our government and so on and so forth. I am not drawing an equivalence between our situation and that of, you know, the occupied Palestinian, but I think in your amazing conversation and interview with the great Mohammed El-Kurd about his new book, I was learning so many lessons from him that feel very relevant to like us today, particularly the gaslighting and the sort of top-down effort to turn the victim into the terrorist. I wanted to play that clip really quick from Mohammed El-Kurd. This is a clip from Abby's show, The Empire Files, which she interviewed Mohammed on recently. So let's play that clip and let's talk about kind of like what this can tell us about how to navigate what we're up against now.
Yeah, and I think the average person, anybody with common sense, would understand that defending yourself against intruders, against colonizers, against thieves, against burglars, against murderous regimes is a fundamental right. You're entitled to defend yourself and your family. And actually, across history, people who have done so have been hailed as heroes. But violence itself is, you know, essentially a mutating concept. It's something to celebrate when it's sanctioned by the empire, and it's something to pro-clutch at when it's done by natives, by these young men in tracksuits. But again, this is it's not like a fundamental Western opposition to violence or you know, militias or whatever. It's a rejection of any kind of political prospect for the Palestinian, because anytime the Palestinian has engaged in armed resistance or has engaged in kinds of resistance that have extended beyond the bounds of what is acceptable to a liberal society, that is, you know, that is the time. Those are some of the only times we have been heard. So what does that say about the world, and what does that say to the Palestinian when we are told time and time again the only time people are going to listen to us and talk about us and put us in their headlines is when we engage in violent resistance? But ultimately, this is about the rejection of Palestinian armed resistance is about a rejection of a Palestinian national project, is about a rejection of actually ending the occupation. Everybody can sing every day about ending the occupation, but when it becomes real, we are terrified of it. We lose our compass. We refuse to even entertain it. For years, maybe all of my life, I've been hearing about a two-state solution while Israeli bulldozers eat away at our land in areas that are supposedly under Palestinian Authority control. It's like a circus where they're just telling us these narratives to buy time while they're creating facts on the ground, while they're setting really the terms of engagement and creating the roadmap for the future while robbing us of any kind of future, and while sanctioning even our ambitions, even our intentions, even our hopes and dreams. You know what I mean? There's also a when we say defanging of Palestinians, it's not just taking our rifles and vilifying our freedom fighters, but there's also interrogation of our thoughts. They ask us, do you condemn this, and do you condemn that, and do you want to do this, and do you want to throw Israelis into the sea, and what's your issue with those people? And it's never about actually engaging with you in a certain political uplifted discourse, but it's about making sure you concede to the liberal world order before you are even allowed entry to the conversation. And that needs to be rejected.
Everyone should go watch that full interview, first thing. Second thing, everyone should go read Mohammed El-Kurd's book by Haymarket Books, Perfect Victim. Third thing, Abby, I've got just some questions I want to throw at you really quick. Can you talk about that clip, what Mohammed's saying there, and how this applies to what we're seeing in the West Bank? A lot of these quote-unquote refugee camps, yes, they are where freedom fighters lived, but also a bunch of regular people who have nowhere else to go. So can you help folks apply what Mohammed's saying there to what we're seeing unfold in the West Bank? But also how this applies to us here, because it does feel eerily reminiscent of the right wing in this country condemning violence of Black Lives Matter protesters while celebrating Kyle Rittenhouse shooting them, right? That double standard does seem to be very much at play here. So I wanted to ask if we could talk about it in the context of the West Bank first and then bring it back home after that.
Absolutely. I think look, it's really, really clear to understand that the West Bank is under a legal occupation, and under international law, Palestinians as well as other people under occupying forces have the legal right to armed resistance. That is enshrined in law. And so when you're looking at a place like the West Bank that houses 3 million Palestinians, and a lot of people are resisting, naturally so. Of course, I mean, that's going to be an inevitability. You're going to resist if you're denied basic human rights, denied clean water, denied mobility. I mean, when you're living under this harsh repression where you can't even celebrate, the hostages coming home, you can't grieve, you can't publicly mourn, you can't erect a flag. I mean, it's absolutely insane what these people are subjected to on a day-to-day basis. And given the genocide that we've seen erupt in Gaza, the unending slaughter of children, I mean, obviously, Palestinians are a united front, despite the political schisms and divisions. And so you're going to see resistance in the West Bank, especially when you see full-scale mobilizations to invade and annex your land illegally. And so it's actually a legal right to see resistance mobilized against Israeli invaders. So first and foremost, we need to zoom out and realize not only is this an egregious and flagrant violation of just the ceasefire, the idea of a ceasefire, that Israel considers a ceasefire just no one reacting to them constantly violating the ceasefire, whether it be in Lebanon or Gaza or in the West Bank, right? They can just go on and do whatever they want with complete impunity. And the second that a Palestinian fights back, oh, they've broken the ceasefire, oh, the deal's off the table. It is so disgustingly one-sided. But when you zoom out from that, I mean, yeah, Palestinians have the right to resist. So what you're seeing in refugee camps, what you're seeing in places like Jenin is resistance, legal resistance, actually. So when Israel uses that as a precursor to then further colonize, it's just absolutely dumbfounding, because it's just completely violating every single law in the books. And this is what they've done for decades, and they're ramping it up under the cover of the ceasefire, of the genocide, saying that Hamas fighters are on the ground. Oh, well, they did this, so of course we need to go and eject thousands of people from their homes, say that they can never return. And it's gaslighting upon gaslighting, but it's also just a refusal of just basic reality and the facts that we know to be true, Max. When you apply that to the United States, it's just such a double-sided, I mean, it's just a completely absurd notion that we're a culture of violence, we worship war. I mean, militarism and war is so ingrained in the psyche of American citizens, especially in the wake of 9/11. It's just a constant thing. But it's only the good arbiters of violence, right? I mean, of course, the U.S. military can do whatever it wants around the world as long as it's doing it in the name of democracy and human rights. If Ukrainians resist against evil Russia, give them all the weapons in the world, turn it into a proxy war where we're throwing Ukrainians into just making them cannon fodder. I mean, it's absolutely insane. But when you're looking at just the basic tenets of what would you do if someone came to your home and said, get out, this is my home now because the Bible says that it is, from thousands of years ago, get the hell out at the barrel of a gun. What would you do? What would your family do? Obviously, you would band together and resist like anyone would, especially Americans. I mean, we're talking about a country that has stand your ground laws that if you just go up and knock on the wrong door, you could get shot and killed legally. So it is just the paradoxical nature of propaganda. It does not make sense and it does not equate. And it's only because of the deep embedded dehumanization of Arabs and specifically Palestinians, and this has been part and parcel with the war on terror propaganda, the deep dehumanization of just Arabs and Muslims in general. And Palestinians are just, I mean, it's absolutely absurd how much they've been dehumanized, where people, even my fellow colleagues as journalists, don't even consider Palestinian journalists journalists. So it's a disgrace upon disgrace, but I think what Mohammed's talking about is so many salient points there of just the utter hypocrisy of the way that we perceive violence. And when it comes to actual decolonization and liberation, which are concepts that make liberals feel uncomfortable, they'd rather keep Palestinians in a perpetual victimhood and treat them as if they just need aid instead of need freedom. Because when you talk about what that actually means, it means fighting back. It means resisting this unending violence and slaughter. What do these people think it means? So what does that actually look like? How does that play out? And how is it successful? And that's why history is so sanitized and these things are just, rewritten by the victors, because they don't want to teach us the hard lessons of how entire countries and peoples have been victorious and have been liberated from empires and from their colonizers in the past.
Yeah, man, and I think that's powerfully put, and I just wanted to emphasize for folks when Abby was asking us what would you do if someone came in and pointed a gun at you and said get out of your home. That happened to Muhammad. That happened to him and his family. I mean, that he became a very prominent international voice while settlers were taking over their home from the states. We're not asking a rhetorical question here. This is a real question. What would you do in that situation? And in terms of how those rules of engagement he talked about are set by this sort of by definition hypocritical, by definition ill-intended entity that is that does not want us to win, that does not want us to have a leg to stand on. We're seeing that being baked into this kind of repressive apparatus that is spreading out across the so-called West here, right? To make an example, right? Claiming that Palestine solidarity encampments on a college campus are a threat to the safety of Jewish students, while like Zionists like beating the shit out of student encampment, students who are encamping on campus, like, is not categorized in the same violent way. So keep that in mind, because I want to kind of focus in here on this sort of like the state of repression back here at home as the war, like across over Palestine, the war on Palestine intensifies. Because over the past 2 years, like even with the ruling elites in government and this whole imperialist, capitalist, war-making establishment, like doing everything that they could to maintain the long-standing unconditional support for Israel's genocidal occupation, ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, like, while all of that has been going on, we have seen a sea change at the base of societies around the globe, and especially here in the United States. The explosion of the Palestine Solidarity Movement, mass protests in D.C. and around the country, the student encampment movement that I mentioned. But the empire is striking back, as you know, Abby. The reactionary ruling class answer to all of this grassroots opposition to Israel's war on Palestine has been to criminalize the methods of that opposition, and to even criminalize and legally recategorize solidarity with Palestinians itself as anti-Semitic, anti-American, and even supportive of quote-unquote terrorism. Like here in the United States, for folks who may have forgotten, in the first weeks in office of his new administration, President Trump signed an executive order to deport foreign university students who participate in Gaza solidarity protests. In a chilling, quote-unquote, fact sheet that accompanied the executive order, the White House said, quote, "To all the resident aliens who joined in the pro-jihadist protests, we put you on notice. Come 2025, we will find you and we will deport you," end quote. But this is not just happening in the U.S. Our colleague, Ali Abu Nima, Palestinian-American journalist and executive director of the online publication, The Electronic Intifada, traveled to Switzerland last month to give a speech in Zurich, and after being allowed to enter the country, Abu Nima was arrested by plainclothes officers, forced into an unmarked vehicle, held incommunicado in jail for 2 nights, and then he was deported from the country. And in Canada, things are getting very dark very quickly. Pro-Palestinian Canadian author and activist Yves Engler was jailed this week for criticizing Zionist influencer Dahlia Kurtz on the social media platform X. Kurtz accused Engler and his posts of harassment, and he was jailed by Montreal police for 5 days. And all of this is happening while back in Toronto, the largest school board in Canada has taken steps to adopt the institutional recategorization of Zionists as a protected class and anti-Zionism as anti-Semitism. And we actually asked our friend and colleague, the brilliant Toronto-based journalist and founder of On the Line Media, Samira Moyadeen, to give us a little update on that story. So let's play that really quick, and then we're going to go back to Abby.
The decision by the Toronto District School Board to receive this report on anti-Semitism is dangerous for a number of reasons. The most important being is that the report conflates anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism and moves to make Zionists a protected class of people under the anti-racism policy. So basically, a political ideology such as Zionism will now be protected as anything else will be, like race, religion, gender, sexuality. It will fall under that realm, which means that to criticize a political ideology such as Zionism will mean that you will be falling under someone who, I don't know, is critical of someone's religion, critical of their sexuality. It will actually make it so that this is a weaponization of people who criticize the actions of Israel, which is a state. So this is very dangerous, and we don't know what sort of effects this will have. What effect will it have on teachers who are teaching history, who are teaching social studies? Does this mean that they can't criticize Israel? What does this mean for Jewish students who are critical of Israeli actions? Will they be penalized? So there's a whole realm of things that the Toronto District School Board really doesn't have answers for yet. And we're really waiting to see how receiving this report, or what even receiving of the report means, what impact it will have both on parents, on students, and most importantly, on teachers who really don't know how to navigate such a thing. And so this is very, very dangerous.
Okay, Abby Martin, what the hell is going on with all of this? like, how are you seeing, I guess, the broad sweep of all this repression?
I mean, even before the genocide in Gaza, I foresaw the writing on the wall, because I, myself was engaged in this litigation against the state of Georgia for their anti-BDS law. So I knew that states were taking measures to preempt the wave of Palestine solidarity that they inevitably knew would come. And that's why we've seen, consulate officials and the Israeli lobby officials going and essentially seeking to undermine our First Amendment rights, the constitutionally protected right to boycott a country. That was enshrined during the Montgomery bus boycotts during the civil rights movement. So I knew that pro-Palestine speech was among the most repressed, among the most criminalized because of these laws. And we've seen, attacks on college campuses, even though there's this kind of notion that right-wing speech is what's heckled and suppressed and repressed on college campuses. I think it's very clear as day, especially in the wake of the Gaza genocide, that pro-Palestine speech is the most repressed and criminalized speech in the country, even though we have this sacred First Amendment, which unfortunately places like the UK doesn't. So you're seeing, raids and arrests of journalists like Asa Winstanley from the Electronic Intifada as well, who was also, his electronic communications were seized. I mean, people like Richard Medhurst, they are being arrested and detained with their communications seized and their devices seized under these absurd counter-terror powers. I mean, usually the charges don't stick at the end of the day, but it's just meant to create a chilling effect and to cement that repressive state where you feel like you can't even do your job as a journalist. So even though we have the First Amendment, it's not doing much to protect us, especially with what's happening on college campuses. I mean, the threats even from Israeli government officials saying you're never going to have a job again. I mean, it's just absolutely insane. I don't even know the words to describe this political climate because, like Mohammed articulated so well, it is like living in someone else's hallucination. It's like living in a fever dream imposed by someone. It's just like, what are we even talking about here? You're telling me that saying from the river to the sea is a terrorist incitement to genocide while I'm seeing genocide? Like, I'm logging onto my device and seeing a genocide, but you're saying that people's words for liberation is the threat. So it's just this topsy-turvy reality that we're trying to wade through. Meanwhile, people's lives are being ruined and destroyed. People are being suspended, expelled. I mean, their jobs are being taken away from them for just speaking facts and just trying to stand in solidarity with people who are being repressed and occupied and killed. And what's happening to journalists, I mean, the fact that Western powers, European powers, are more concerned with criminalizing pro-Palestine journalism and speech than they are stopping a genocide really just says it all, doesn't it? These institutions, these global bodies that have been in place for the last 70 years to try to prevent the never again, to try to stop genocide, at least in, the era or the auspices of. And these same institutions have just been made a mockery of by the same states that have created them. I mean, I think we know at this point the rules-based order in these international bodies, it was never designed to really have egalitarianism or to protect all peoples who are oppressed. No, it was to protect and shroud the West with impunity. And when it's a Western ally that's committing genocide in plain day, well, we see exactly what these institutions are designed to do. And we've seen the threats, the ICC sanctions against the members of the court, their families, what's happening in South Africa from the Trump administration. It's an upside down world where drone bombings are not terrorism, because that's just seen as normal day-to-day operations of the empire and its junior collaborators and its colonial outposts. But words and incitement, all of these things are unacceptable. right? And so that's what you're seeing. You're seeing an extreme policing of our language and intent. Meanwhile, the people who are ruling the world, the global elite, can do whatever they want out of the shadows, plain as day, commit genocide and ethnic cleansing and boast about it, and make all of us just scurry like mice trying to catch up. Meanwhile, we can't say shit. And so it's a war on the mind. It's a war on our thoughts. You know, it's beyond even an information war. I mean, it is a war on reality itself.
And those of us who are trying to report on it, right? I mean, like, there's, we didn't even mention it, but there's, like, on top of everything, like, there's a nonprofit, you know, killer bill, HR 9495, or the Stop Terror Financing and Tax Penalties on American Hostages Act. That already passed the House of Representatives. Gonna pass in the Senate at some point, but that's another thing that, like, I think about daily because I am the co-executive director and editor-in-chief of a nonprofit journalism outlet. And this bill, if passed, would effectively give the Trump administration the ability to unilaterally declare that orgs like ours are terrorist supporting, not because we're providing material support for, like, Hamas or anything like that, but because our speech, the way we report honestly about the genocide in Palestine, is being recategorized as, like, support for terrorism. And so we could lose our nonprofit status. That's going to kill most nonprofits that get targeted. It won't kill all of them, but it'll be a massive financial hit. But also the leaders of those orgs could be held personally liable. They could be attacked. Like, this is something that I have to think about and talk to my family about all the time. Like, I mean, this plus the firings of, you know, tenured professors at universities, threats to deport foreign students who are participating in protests, locking up, you know, like journalists, you know, for social media posts. Like, this is a really intense and dark time. And while all of this is happening, you know, Elon Musk is leading a techno-fascist coup in our government. And I want to end there in a second. But by way of getting there, since we've got you on and since you mentioned it, Abby, like, of course, you, Abby Martin, were famously at the center of this critical free speech battle against Georgia Southern University when, you know, the university rescinded the offer to have you deliver a keynote speech because you refused to sign a BS contract that illegally stipulated speakers were forbidden from openly supporting any boycott of Israel. So I wanted to ask if just by way of getting us to the final turn, if there are any lessons that you learned, even from just the decision to fight that we could really internalize and need to internalize to face what we're facing today.
Yes, I think it's a multi-pronged battle, and we have to utilize every arm of the fight. I mean, the courts are absolutely one important facet that we need to utilize. I think if there were plaintiffs in every state taking on these BDS laws, then hopefully it will go to the Supreme Court, even though they said that they didn't want to hear it right now. There are enough mixed verdicts that would bring this to the attention of the Supreme Court. And I think, you know, if anyone is trained in constitutional law, well, we don't know about these Trump appointees, but I mean, anyone who knows the Constitution would say it's very clear these are flagrantly unconstitutional laws, and hopefully we would put an end to it. But I think that they're just so desperate, and you know, they know that it's going to take it's a long slog to challenge all these laws. But we absolutely have to. We have to in every single state. And that's just one part of it, Max. I mean, the media, obviously, the fact that Elon Musk has taken over our town hall. He is, I mean, on one hand, what Trump and Elon Musk are doing is kind of exposing the incestuous relationship with the so-called legacy media and the way that the political establishment operates within it. But on the other hand, it's very scary because they're maneuvering it all to consolidate it with the right-wing sphere of influence and using this kind of populist, you know, fake news rhetoric to do that. And that's very disturbing and damaging because as leftists and people who are trying to do citizen journalism for grassroots organizing and things like that, we are in for a very tough road ahead because we don't have billionaire funding like they do. But I would say my biggest lesson learned is that we have to take on every part of the battle like they have. I mean, they've planned for 50 years, taking over the institutions, taking over the media, and taking over the courts. And we are 10 steps behind. And we have to do everything in our power. And that means day in and day out. It's not pulling a lever every 2 to 4 years. It's being a part of this active struggle to maintain democratic rights, human rights, and try to have some sort of international solidarity with the people living under the boot of our policies.
Let's keep talking about that in this last 15 minutes that we've got here, because you're one of the many folks that I've been thinking about a lot since Trump was inaugurated, really wondering what your analysis of all of this is. And so many of us are trying to figure out and articulate what is actually happening. I just interviewed 3 federal workers, 2 of whom were illegally fired, for the podcast Working People. We published it yesterday. Folks should go listen to what they have to say. It's really important, right? I mean, but even there, we're talking about battling the narrative that Musk himself and Trump and the whole administration and Fox News and these rejiggered algorithms on social media that are platforming and pushing more right-wing narratives. All of that is saying that this is all done in the name of efficiency, that Trump and Musk are out there cutting government waste, attacking the corrupt deep state that's getting in the way of the will of the American people. But if you talk to federal workers, they're no, that's not what they're doing at all. They are slashing the hell out of it. They are just non-surgically destroying government agencies, laying whole groups of people off and throwing the government into disarray. None of this is done in the name of efficiency, and we shouldn't even be taking that at face value when the guy who's telling us that it's being done in the name of efficiency is giving Zig Heil salutes on public stages. So maybe we should stop assuming, as the great Adam Johnson said.
Stiff-armed, awkward gesture.
Stiff-arm Roman,
Stiff-arm Roman salute and an awkward gesture.
It's nuts, but it's just maybe the point being is, hey, maybe this guy is acting ideologically. Maybe he's acting self-interestedly. Why do we keep buying the narrative that he's acting uninterestedly in just the name of efficiency? That's insane. It requires us to ignore the reality in front of our faces. But again, I wanted to kind of bring us back to this point, because everything we've been talking about now, from tanks in the West Bank, the potential of the Gaza ceasefire falling apart, criminalization and crackdown on free speech and protest across the West, all of that is happening while, Elon Musk, the richest man in the world and the unelected destroyer of government agencies, is literally and figuratively on a maniacal chainsaw-wielding rampage through the institutional guts of what remains of liberal democracy and the administrative state. And so this all feels so overwhelming. And I think most folks, because they know what you just said is right, that we're playing so far behind and they have seemingly all the control, the impulse is going to be to close off, to protect what's ours, to hide, to silence ourselves. So I wanted to ask you, with the last few minutes we've got, what is your analysis of what's happening in our government right now? And what does this all mean for how do we move forward and keep fighting for what's right and good, even though it's getting really perilous and really dangerous out there?
Oh my God. I mean, it's really difficult. And looking at the lessons gleaned from the Iraq War era, when I was radicalized and activated to do media work and activism, what was different about that time was the fact that there was a more multi-pronged kind of united front, with a lot of libertarians who were disaffected, a lot more right-wingers who hated the Bush administration. There seems to be kind of a cult-like emergence of this sycophant worshipping of a figure like Donald Trump. And that's what's so disturbing about MAGA in general, and by proxy, someone like Elon Musk, a South African oligarch, as well as the whole PayPal mafia, all these oligarchs from South Africa coming over here and just seizing government control, and which is completely illegal. I mean, that doesn't even really need to be said, all the unconstitutional nature of what they're doing. But it's just so perplexing because of the way that he's been able to siphon support from people who historically would not necessarily just worship a billionaire. I mean, back decades ago, it was the Republican Party was kind of cartoonishly just so detached from the working class, because it was just so clearly just a party for billionaires and tax breaks for the wealthy. But because of the abject failure of the Democrats to form any sort of opposition, I mean, what is their Project 2025? There is no goal. There's no vision. They're scrambling to figure out how could they even stand in opposition to what's going on. They're 10 steps behind. But because of their failure and their ineptitude and the lies and the propaganda and the media manipulation and the war on terror, because they've failed so horribly and mirrored Republicans on so much, naturally you've seen this kind of faux populism reroute a lot of disaffected people into the Republican Party. And for the first time, we saw people who were under, $100,000 or less actually vote en masse for Trump. This is an unprecedented shift, a tectonic shift in how these parties have really played out. So I would argue the failure of the Democrats have driven people into the hands of Trump. And it doesn't matter if it's fake or not. They want someone to blame for their problems. And they look at Trump and they say, yeah, immigrants, trans people, sure, whatever will help solve my, basically buffer my reality. They want people to say what is wrong and who's doing it. That's why Bernie resonated so much. I mean, he pointed to the oligarchic class. He pointed to the people, the actual robber barons who consolidated all of the wealth during the COVID era. But now we're in this really bizarre kind of weirdly entrenched new Trump regime where he's folded in all of the tech overlords who, by the way, all of the DEI rhetoric and all the people who are like corporations are wokeism and liberalism have taken over and dominated our culture. Actually, it was just the notion that women should have rights and gay people should be out. Because you saw the virtue signaling completely go by the wayside. The second that everyone resigned to the fact that Trump was going to be president again, what happened with Google? Don't be evil, right? All of these people who were actually protesting the Muslim ban and had really strong rhetoric against Trump back in 2016, they are completely folded in just seamlessly because it never was about that. It was all virtue signaling. They were always right wing. They always didn't care that Trump was who he is. I mean, it really is just so obvious. The ruling class never really cared about Trump or his policies or the threat of fascism or the erosion of democracy. They just cared that he was a bull in a china shop, right? He was just unpredictable. He was uncouth. And all they care about is that peaceful transition of power, and the system just keeps going and the status quo just keeps churning on. And that's why January 6th was such an abomination for them. It wasn't because of anything else. And so now I think everything's been exposed. Everything is clear as day. That's why we don't see anything. There's no actual opposition forming. And when you look at the grassroots and all the mobilized efforts, I mean, I think there's such a fatigue with activism because for the last 15 months, people have been out in the streets opposing Biden's subsidization and oversight of genocide. So now we're supposed to go and fight tooth and nail against the fascist takeover of the government. It's like, God damn, for the last 15 months, we've been out in the streets and no one's been listening to us about stopping genocide. So, I mean, it's such a dizzying, disorienting time intentionally. The shock and awe of this mass firings of federal workers, the thousands and thousands of federal workers, it's so clear as day what they're doing. They're just gutting. In the interim, they're trying to do as much damage as they can because they know that the time that the courts basically do their jobs, it's going to be too late. Trump has stacked enough courts at the end of the day, and Republicans have, that even if there's a million challenges legally, the damage is going to be done. You can't pick up the pieces and just go back to the way things were. And that's the intent. For all intents and purposes, they are trying to gut any sort of semblance of institutions that care for people. Cruelty is the point. Poor people, elderly people, disabled people, those are who are going to be the brunt of these services that are being cut. The Veterans Affairs, I mean, all these people from the crisis hotline, all these veterans who are calling with suicidal ideation, those people are being cut. Medicaid, I mean, the statistic flying around, $880 billion, that's the entirety of Medicaid. So when they're talking about, oh, these budget cuts are going to cut $880 billion from this one committee, yeah, that's the entirety of Medicaid. Who is that going to affect? 73 million Americans. I mean, the short-sightedness of all of this is just astonishing, but that's not the point. They know how much damage it's going to do. They don't care. They want to gut everything and privatize everything. The post office, the VA, every last bastion of government services that work, that are good and healthy for a democratic society. And it's going to do so much damage. I mean, just the environmental damage. And what's so funny, all of these, the discussions, people like to take everything that Trump says at face value. They're like, oh, well, he says he wants to cut the Pentagon budget in half. Oh, well, really? Because on the other side of his mouth, he's saying the exact opposite, that he wants to increase the Pentagon budget for this, that, and the other. And when you look at what Hegseth is saying about what they're actually cutting, it's all the climate change initiatives that they were, all the cursory attempts to try to placate environmentalists. Like, no, we're greening this global military empire. So it's just it's so bad in every way, but I would just urge people to just not feel overwhelmed with the barrage of news, the rapid fire nature of the algorithm. Our brains are not meant to digest news in this way or information in this way. Let Max and I do it. Let us do it. Don't get overwhelmed by the day-to-day just paralysis of the shock and awe of what they're doing, because that's the intent. You cannot get paralyzed. You cannot just detach yourself from this. We have to be plugged in to the capacity that you can, right? We have to all be plugged into how we can all make a dent in our lives, and let Max and I do the dirty work of sorting through the propaganda on the day-to-day. But it's going to be a really tough road ahead, Max.
It is, and I appreciate everything that you said, and I just kind of had a final tiny question, because I know we got to wrap, but on that last point, because Abby and I, our whole team here at The Real News, everyone you see on screen and also everyone you don't, who makes everything that we produce possible, we're going to keep manning our posts. We're going to keep doing our work. We're going to keep speaking the truth. But as you have learned from this conversation, there may be a great cost to pay for that. And I think that's also something that we all need to sit with and think about, because people don't ask to be kind of in the moments in history they find themselves in, but how we respond to those moments defines who we are as people, as generations, and, as movements. And so, Abby, I didn't go to journalism school. I don't know if you did. I never set out to be a journalist. I never thought I would find myself sitting in this chair as the executive director, co-executive director, and editor-in-chief of a nonprofit journalism outlet. But if I can think back to even my early days, the through line from then to here, I was raised by great people who taught me to stand up for what's right and speak my truth, especially, speak it unwaveringly in the face of those who, want to shut me up. And I'm not someone who shuts up easily. That's probably why I'm here. That's why Abby's doing what she does. If you try to shut her up, she'll file a lawsuit against your ass and win it, right? I mean, but there's a non-zero chance that, being who we are, doing what we do, because we're going to do it. We're going to do it for you. We're going to do it because it's right. There's a non-zero chance we could end up in prison for it or have our outlet shut down. But that just is what it is. And so, Abby, with that kind of on the table, I just wanted to ask if you had any kind of parting words to folks out there who depend on our journalism, folks out there who do journalism, any final notes about the real state that we're in, what we're facing, but also what we need to, how we need to be kind of steeling our hearts to keep fighting for what's right and not allowing ourselves to be silenced, even though, they're going to try really hard to do so.
Absolutely. I mean, it's going to be so hard for just average Americans and workers who are suffering the brunt of these policies. Obviously, it's going to be really hard for them to engage in the struggle because they're worried about how they're going to, survive day to day. They have no savings and they're living paycheck to paycheck, and it's just going to get worse. I mean, look, I became a journalist out of necessity because I saw the failure of the institutional media and the legacy media and the drive to the Iraq War. And I realized that it didn't matter if I was standing on a street corner with a sign. I mean, no one's going to hear what you have to say unless you advocate through a media, avenue. I mean, you have to utilize the tools that we have available to speak these truths, to speak power, truth to power, and to hold power to account. And we're in a very dystopian era where, again, words are considered terrorist incitement, especially when it comes to pro-Palestine advocacy. I run a nonprofit as well. Empire Files is a nonprofit. And it's this paradox where you have our job revenues and our ability to tell this information potentially being threatened with shutdown. Meanwhile, you have charities very active and lucrative being able to fund people from America to go over and take over a Palestinian family's home. Like literally nonprofit charities can go fund a genocidal army to kill Palestinians for sport. So that's the world that we're living in. It's a very topsy-turvy world set by actually a crime syndicate and a global mafia. And the enforcer is the US military. I am in a place of privilege to the point where I can at least speak these facts. We're not living under a totalitarian dictatorship yet, where our First Amendment is completely gone. So I will continue to speak out and speak these facts and hold power to account and speak the truth as I see it and not be played or propagandized by the billionaire class. I'm happy that at least we can rise above this deep-seated propaganda where they're telling us black is white and saying, no, this multi-billion-dollar propaganda apparatus does not work on me. And we're able to see things clearly. And we're going to speak those truths clearly, no matter where they take us. Because Max, I think you and I both know that even though it's a dangerous road ahead, we're not going to stop doing our jobs. We're going to speak truth to power. And we see what's happening to our colleagues. But you know what? I'm going to keep speaking truth to power because my colleagues are being gunned down, mowed down, systematically. And so until that threat is on my doorstep, you're not going to be able to shut me up, man. You're not going to be able to shut me up because my friends are being killed. And I take that very seriously because a threat to justice anywhere means that injustice is still rooted everywhere. So we have to keep fighting because we can't stop. We're going to let these criminals win. We're going to let them destroy the planet and kill off the sake of any viable habitat for our children. We're going to let that happen? No. Yes, the odds are stacked against us. Yes, the institutions have completely been hijacked by these maniacs, these genocidal maniacs and sociopaths. But that's not enough to stop us. We have to keep fighting. We have no other choice. And even if we lose, well, we sure as hell tried. We sure as hell tried. And we owe it to every person on this planet that is living under the boot of our policies, that doesn't have the privilege of being an American citizen, that's just dealing with the brunt of the effects of sanctions, of war, of bombings, of this economic terrorism. We owe it to them, and we owe it to the kids that we've brought into this world. We cannot stop, Max. We cannot stop. And history's been stacked before. Yes, the crisis is more existential with the environmental calamities that we're facing. But we've been in deep crises before. Slavery, the civil rights. I mean, not people literally living in abject slavery. We have to continue to fight for the better future that we know is possible. I would not be able to live with myself if I gave up. It's not an option. It's not an option.
Wholeheartedly agree, sis. And I love you, and I'm in solidarity with you, and I'm as scared as I think I'll ever be, but I'm not going to stop either. So it's an honor to be in this struggle with you, and to all of you watching. Again, we will continue to speak truth to power, and we will continue fighting for the truth and speaking that truth to empower you, because that is also why we do what we do. Because when working people have the truth, like the powerful cannot take that away from us, right? And it is the truth that we need to know how to act, because we are ultimately the ones who are going to decide how this history is written. I don't know what's going to happen in the next few years, but I know what will happen if we, regular people of conscience, do nothing. If we do nothing, I can tell you what's going to happen. But what happens next is up to us. And Abby, The Real News, all of our colleagues who are out there fighting for the truth will keep doing that as long as we possibly can to empower you to be the change that we need to see in this world. Because this world is worth fighting for, and the future is worth fighting for, and it's not gone yet. So thank you all for fighting. Thank you for caring. Abby Martin, thank you so much for coming on The Real News yet again. Thank you for all the invaluable work that you do. Can you please just tell folks one more time, like, where they can find you, how they can support your work, and then I promise we'll let you go.
Max, thank you so much. I couldn't agree more. I mean, the love and the family are in the struggle. And for people who may be feeling really isolated out in the middle of nowhere and feel, what can I do? I'm totally just, immobilized from all of this, the paralysis from our political state of affairs. I mean, reach out. It is literally the most important thing you could do is reach out to your like-minded people in your area, go on meetup groups, figure out what people are doing to just generate activism with whatever issue, because that is where the love and the family and the friendships is the struggle and getting involved. And that's going to take you out of this kind of atomization that the system imposes on us. I love Real News Network. I'm so honored to be on anytime, Max. I'm honored to call you a friend and a comrade. People can find my work at Empire Files, the empirefiles.tv, and also our new documentary is going to come out this year. I'm really excited about it, earthsgreatestenemy.com. Thank you so much again.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, sis. And to all you watching, that is the great Abby Martin. If you are not already, please, please, please go subscribe to her channel, The Empire Files. Support the work that she's doing. And please support the work that we're doing here at The Real News, because we cannot keep doing it without you. And we do it for you. So please, before you go, subscribe to this channel, become a member of our YouTube community. Please donate to The Real News by going to therealnews.com/donate, especially if you want to see more conversations like this and more coverage from the front lines of struggle around the U.S. and across the world. And for all of us here at The Real News Network, this is Maximilian Alvarez signing off. Please take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Solidarity forever. Thank you so much for watching The Real News Network, where we lift up the voices, stories, and struggles that you care about most. And we need your help to keep doing this work. So please, tap your screen now, subscribe, and donate to The Real News Network. Solidarity forever.